Hello, Miss Fancius's class, and of course, my one algebra class as well. So we are moving on with quadratics, whether we are ready or not at this point. Today we're talking about the quadratic formula, and the good thing about the quadratic formula is everything that we've learned up to this far when solving quadratics for x, my quadratic formula will always and forever work. So when I was taught the quadratic formula in 8th grade, I learned it with a little song, and that is forever how I will remember that formula. So we're going to start out with a little song. It's a minute long. We may or may not listen to the whole minute. We may or may not play it on repeat in class for the next few days, and that's okay.
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
I'm going to save you guys the horror of having to listen to me sing. So let's talk about what that means, what that looks like. So when I'm looking at that example problem, the first step is to make sure that my formula is in standard form. So I wanted to look like ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So I'm looking at number 1. If it's not equal to 0, something's wrong. I got to change something. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Then we're going to identify a, b, and c. So for here, my a is 1. My b is negative 5. My c is negative 36. I'm going to give you guys a heads up that you may or may not need some scratch paper today. Once we have those values identified, and I want to see that on every problem today. I want to see you writing a equals in a number, b equals in a number, and c equals in a number. We're starting good habits from day 1. We're going to take those numbers and we're going to plug it into this formula. Negative b, so my b is already negative. The negative version of negative 5 would be positive 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Make sure that because my b is negative, it is inside the parentheses. B squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So let's take that and let's simplify it. Let's make it look not so ugly. So negative 5 squared is 25. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 36 is a positive 144. So to make it look a little bit neater, I could say 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 plus 144 all over 2a, which is 2 times 1, which is 2. I can take this and I can simplify it down a little bit more. 5 plus or minus the square root of 169 divided by 2. I could take that even and simplify it down even more. That's the same thing as 5 plus or minus 13 over 2. And you're like, hold up, Miss Miller. How does the square root of 169 equal 13? If that's not a perfect square we have memorized, I can use my calculator. The square root of 169 gives me that 13. So I've got to figure out two different answer choices. What is 5 plus 13 divided by 2? And what is 5 minus 13 divided by 2? My formula has this plus or minus, which means I better have one option with plus, one option with minus. Well, 5 plus 13 is 18 over 2, which is 9. 5 minus 13 is negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. So those are both possible answer choices. If I were to graph that on my calculator, it would cross the x-axis at negative 4 and positive 9. So when we write our answer, we're going to write them with commas, negative 4, comma, 9. But instead of parentheses, we're going to use these little curly braces. That's telling me that that is not a point on my graph, negative 4, comma, 9. That is the point negative 4 on the x-axis, and that is the point 9 on the x-axis. As we go through this step right here, I'm probably going to go through and I'm going to skip over writing it. But if that is necessary for you, feel free to do so. So let's look at number 1, and then I'm going to turn you loose. So it's a big red flag to me that when I'm looking at this, I don't see an equal to 0. So I got to fix that. I need to move that 20 to the other side by subtracting 20. X squared minus 8x minus 20 is equal to the 0 out. So I can look and see that my A is 1. My B is negative 8. My C is negative 20. So negative B, negative version of negative 8 is positive 8, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So I'm going to zoom in to simplify out. Negative 8 squared is 64. I'm going to go through this math. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 20 is a positive 20. 64 plus 20 is... No, Miss Miller can't math today. Negative 4 times negative 20 would be a positive 80. 64 plus 80 is 144. So I'm looking at 8 plus or minus the square root of 144 over 2. Because 2 times 1 is 2. So some of you might automatically know off the top of your head what the square root of 144 is. But for those of us that don't, the square root of 144 is 12. So we're doing 8 plus or minus 12 divided by 2. So we're going to have two possible answers. 8 plus 12 over 2. 8 minus 12 over 2. 8 plus 12 is 20. 20 over 2 is 10. 8 minus 12 is negative 4. Negative 4 over 2 is negative 2. When we write our answer choices, I didn't mention this a while ago, I just did it. But I always want to write the smallest number or the negative number first. Negative 2, comma 10, with these little curly braces, and these are my answers. If I were to graph that and look at the graph, that would be crossing the x-axis. Actually, let's just look at on a graph. Y equals x squared minus 8x minus 20. Let's see what my graph looks like. So when I look at my graph, I can see that it's crossing right here at that negative 2, but it's also crossing right here at that positive 10, which is exactly what our quadratic formula just told us, that we'd cross at negative 2 and positive 10. So what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and I want you to work out 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. If you are in my room, you can come to me or come to the iPad and check your answers for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. If you're in Miss Mancias's room, I have left answer keys with the sub, and so you will have that option to check yourself if you want to or if you need to. I have worked out all of the problems on the answer key, so you have that at your advantage. When you get to number 7, I want you to resume the video. So go ahead and pause the video now, work out 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 before moving on. So on number 7, I gotta change it to get it equal to 0. So I'm gonna subtract x from both sides, which is gonna give me x squared plus 6x, but I also have to move that 10 by doing the opposite. Plus 10 is equal to 0. My a is 1, my b is 6, my c is 10. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So when I look at this, 6 squared is 36. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 10 is negative 40. So that leaves me with negative 6 plus or minus 36 minus 40 is negative 4. Plus or minus the square root of negative 4. 2 times 1 is 2. So I got to break this down. The square root of negative 4. So I'm going to type that in my calculator because I'm not super familiar with negatives. The square root of negative 4 doesn't work. Well, maybe I typed it in wrong. I'm going to try it again. The square root of negative 4 still does not work. It's going to say error. It's going to say no real answer because there is no number that when I multiply itself by itself would give me a negative answer like negative 4. It's not going to work. So my answer would be this 0 with a slash through it. I can write no solution. I'm going to write no real solution. And that is my answer. If I do the math correctly and I somehow end up with a negative number underneath the square root, it is forever and always going to give me an answer or an error. It is forever and always going to give me no real solution. I'll give you a heads up that that is the only problem on this whole entire paper that is like that. Let's go ahead and pause the video real quick, work through number 8, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about numbers 9 and 10. So when I'm looking at number 9, it's obviously a different section. It's titled Irrational Solutions. So we got to talk about what that means. But to start out, my problem starts out the same. My A is 1. My B is 4. My C is 1. Negative B plus or minus the square root, the more you do this, the more that song's going to be stuck in your head. The square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 1 again is negative 4. 16 minus 4 is 12. Negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 12 divided by 2. So I'm going to type this in my calculator and see what happens. So when I type the square root of 12, it gives me this ugly decimal answer. And we're not going to write plus or minus 3.464, blah, 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 blah. It's an ugly decimal. It's never going to end. It's called an irrational answer. But we have worked with solving or simplifying those irrational square roots before this year. Over on the side, I gave myself a little cheat sheet of all of my perfect squares. So for some of you, or for most of you, you're probably going to want to pause the video and write that little cheat sheet down that is over here. I want to know, of these solutions, which of these numbers can I multiply by something to get 12? I want to know the biggest number that I can multiply to get 12. 100 times nothing won't give me 12. 81 times nothing will give me 12. I'm going to keep marking out the biggest options. 9 doesn't go evenly into 12, but 4 does. I could say that the square root of 12 is the same thing as 4 times 3. So I could transform that into negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 3 all over 2. And now that I have it broken down, I can say that the square root of 4 is 2. Negative 4 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3 all over 2. So these problems are not ever going to completely get rid of that radical, that square root symbol. They're going to stay around. We just have to simplify it out. But I have this division. I have this divided by 2. So we are going to divide negative 4 by 2, and we're going to divide 2 by 2. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1, so it disappears. Then that square root of 3. So this right here is my answer. This is one of the only times that I can leave that plus or minus as part of my answer. Some of our brains are like reeling right now. So let's look at one more together. So when I look at number 10, A equals negative 1, B equals negative 2, C equals 7. Negative version of B, 2 plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times negative 1. Negative 2 squared is going to give me 4. Negative 4 times negative 1 is going to give me a positive 4. Positive 4 times 7 is going to give me a positive 28. So I'm really working with Woo! 2 plus or minus the square root of 32, because 4 plus 28 is 32, all over -2. So again, I'm going to use my cheat sheet. I want to figure out the biggest number from here that will perfectly divide into 32. And it's going to be 16. 16 times 2 would give me 32. So 2 plus or minus the square root of 16 times the square root of 2 all over -2. That square root of 16 I can simplify down to 4. So I'm taking that into 2 plus or minus 4 times the square root of 2 all over -2. And then we're going to divide. 2 divided by -2 is going to leave me with -1 plus or minus 4 divided by -2 would give me -2, but because it's plus or minus, I'm just going to say +2 times the square root of 2. And there is my answer. So you're going to finish out 11, 12, 13, and 14. Again, you can check yourself as you go. When you finish, if you finish in class today, just continue on into those homework problems. We're going to practice this quadratic formula for a few days. It takes some getting used to. Let's get busy.